Welcome to a brand new edition of the Taiwan Outlook. I'm your host, Raymond Wu. In today's program, we're going to talk about the issue that concerns a lot of people, namely the Asia-Pacific relations as well as international relations. And we are delighted and honored to have an international relations expert, Professor Bih-Rong Liu from Soochow University, to be our guest on the program today. Professor Liu, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Okay. Professor Liu, I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about the situation in Northeast Asia. As we all know, about a couple of weeks ago, the U.S. State Department removed North Korea from its blacklist of state sponsors of terrorism. And that's subject to a nuclear inspection agreement reached between Washington and Pyongyang, in which the inspection agreement will allow nuclear experts to come into the nuclear sites and plants in North Korea to take samples and forensic evidence to make sure that the nuclear weapon development program is stopped. And this program is yet to be formalized by the other parties to the Sixparty talk. And people do think, however, that this inspection agreement is the reason why the U.S. removed North Korea from the blacklist of state sponsor of terrorism, but also at the same time, people believe that this is the reason why relations between Washington and Pyongyang has improved in recent months. And do you think that North Korea will actually comply with the inspection agreement, or do you see something of a variable in the future that may, disrupt the whole six-party talk process?
Actually, nobody can be that sure
about what happens with North Korea.
Or North Korea will comply to or stick to the agreement.
Yes.
Actually, the agreement that we reached is there is an ambiguous part. The Pyongyang only allowed the inspector to visit Yanbian, the nuclear facility.
Yes.
But if there is another suspected site, for example, so far they only allow people to inspect the plutonium reprocessing facility. But how about the uranium enrichment facilities?
Okay.
But they didn't mention that.
Okay.
And you mentioned about the North Korean government allow the international arms inspector to bring samples for test. But to test these samples in North Korea or to bring the foreign country and the laboratory to have test, they didn't mention it.
That's right.
But at least Pyongyang make a little bit concession. They allow the inspectors to visit other suspect site, as long as North Korean government agreed to it. In the past, the North Korean totally rejected this kind of idea. So you can visit the place outside Yanbian. But now they allow at least they can be discussed.
Okay.
So some people think this is the best deal so far we can get. So if we only talk about the negotiation per se, forget about the foreign policy. We will talk about the foreign policy objective later.
Okay.
But in terms of negotiation skills, and some negotiation expert or proliferation expert, American experts, they agreed that might be the best result they could get in this time.
Yeah, I think Professor Liu mentioned a very important critical point, is that outside of Pyongyang, nobody can know exactly what North Korea would do next. But certainly, I think Washington is also making a goodwill gesture, if you don't want to call it a concession, in terms of abandoning its former assistance on the bilateral talk, but now it's approaching just purely on the U.S.-North Korea basis. And like I mentioned earlier, is the fact that this inspection agreement has yet to be formalized and accepted by the other four parties to the six-party talk, namely China, Japan, South Korea, and Russia. And what do you think these other four parties will react to such an inspection agreement? And do you think this will necessarily bring a new momentum into this multilateral mechanism to try to bring peace and stability to Northeast Asia?
But actually, there are several aspects we can discuss also.
Okay.
The first one, the so-called six-party talks, is this necessary to bring stability to Northeast Asia? Some people wonder if the United States can develop direct talks with North Korea. So in that case, six-party talks will not be necessary.
Okay.
They can directly develop their direct talks or even diplomatic relations between these two countries.
Exactly.
So the other parties of these six-party talks, particularly Japan,
yes.
they are very, you can see a little bit worried or angry about the current development because the whole development in or the American decision to drop North Korea from the blacklist, actually they sidelining Japan. Japan didn't know that in advance, so they will be noticed later. So that's why some American hardliners, they criticize that, and they said this is an expression of American, or at least the Bush administration's Sino-centric obsession.
Of course.
So they put China. They think China is more important than Japan. So in that case, you can imagine how will Japan respond. So those are several things. One is six-party talks, and another is whether or not there could be a stability or security in North Asia, and we also think about whether Americans, at least the Bush administration, they draw the red line. In the very beginning, of course, the United States said that North Korea, you could not have nuclear weapons. But later they retreated. They said, as long as you don't sell arms or proliferate nuclear weapons, that could be accepted as a reality. So what we are concerned with is not only the situation or the development between North Korea and the United States. What we're really concerned with is response. How will these neighboring countries, how will be their response? Some people predicted the Japanese may be very angry, then they will go ahead to develop their own nuclear weapons. For example, John Bolton, the American hardliners, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, he predicted maybe Japanese will develop their own nuclear program. In that case, it will cause a kind of a nuclear arms races in Northeast Asia.
And proliferation.
And then that will become a problem.
Yes, okay.
But I think it's too pessimistic. I don't think the things will go that bad.
Yeah, I certainly hope not. So the issue that you raised about the necessity or the applicability of a multilateral approach to this, North Korea problem is now probably becoming obsolete if U.S. can talk directly with North Korea. But the fact of the matter remains is, the administration in Washington has about, 2 to 3 months left before it leaves office next January. And the fact of the matter remains is, since the six-party talk, the multilateral approach began, it's been bringing some domestic capital, back into the U.S. For Bush administration. So would you think without, like you mentioned, without certain aspects of the nuclear inspection agreement to be very clear, and as you stated, it's probably very ambiguous. Would you think such an agreement reached between North Korea and U.S. maybe for domestic consumption purposes, in the sense that the Bush administration may want to put a very nice concluding mark on this six-party approach before he leaves office in about 3 months' time?
Certainly. I agree to that. If you look at Bush's the achievement in the diplomacy, he didn't achieve anything so far. Iran, Afghanistan, and if he can achieve something in North Korea, of course he can say the mission almost accomplished in North Korea. But one thing we don't have to forget that North Korean situation is very unstable now, because nobody can know what will happen to Kim Jong-il. Is Kim Jong-il still in charge, or he is ill, or there is enter a very critical transitional period to pass the political power to another military elite? Some people predicted that if military hardliners control the political power, then the relations between South Korea and North Korea were getting worse.
That's right.
And of course, maybe they will rearm themselves. They continue to develop a nuclear program. So before things go to that way, maybe they try to strike a deal with North Korea. and make them believe. So maybe striking deal and sit down to talk with the best for North Korea.
Yes.
So I think on the one hand, Bush administration, at least, or President Bush he himself, wanted to have some achievement.
That's
on
right.
the other hand, maybe the best way to engage in North Korea before, after Kim Jong-il, if Kim Jong-il died and there's something out of control. So there's some several purposes, I guess.
Yes, yeah. Maybe before we end this segment, I may ask Professor Liu, you mentioned very interestingly about the role of China, plays in all of this. And we know that when the Six-Party talk first started, China was the one who was, the architect or the motivator behind the multilateral approach, especially at the time that Washington was not talking to Pyongyang at all, not on a bilateral basis. But now with the U.S. and North Korea moving closer to a bilateral dialogue, what do you think will happen to the role of China in the Six-Party talk, and also the fact that would that have any bearing at all, if any, on the U.S.-China relations?
I think there will be a new structure or new mechanism will gradually develop.
Okay.
If the United States want to have to develop formal diplomatic relations with North Korea, then they'll have four-party talks. That means China, North Korea, South Korea, and the United States to replace the current six-party talks. Then you can see that Japan is being excluded from this new structure.
Yes.
So that's why I think Japan tried to bring in new issue. For example, the kidnapped Japanese. They also always concerned with this to have these Japanese back to Japan from North Korea. When Koizumi was a prime minister, once he flew to North Korea to discuss with Kim Jong-il about the Japanese thing, the abductees things. So that's the problem. So originally we thought maybe Koizumi could lead new diplomacy in Northeast Asia, but later Prime Minister Koizumi, he failed. He didn't change the agenda, didn't lead a new issue to that. But now Japanese, of course, their Prime Minister changed one after one. Their situation is very unstable. So they have no time or no leverage to try to influence the North Korea, Northeast Asian issues. So once there are four-party structure gradually developed to replace the six-party mechanism, then I was very interesting to know, very curious to know if Japan, how will really respond.
Yes.
But anyway, six-party or four-party, China always have a very important role there.
To play. Yes. Well, thank you for your comment, Professor Liu. Next, we'll take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about a very important political and international event. That's the U.S. election on November 4th. And what will happen with the election will have a lot of impact on what happens in world affairs after January 20th, 2009. We'll be right back.